Aunt Vianne clinked her glass and smiled at the room like she'd been waiting all evening for exactly this moment. She wrapped her arm around my cousin Imogen, warm, proud, pulling her close in the specific way she pulled things close when she wanted everyone to see that they belonged to her. "Meet my successful niece," she announced. The room applauded, genuine and warm. Then Vianne laughed. That light, easy laugh she used when something unkind was about to be delivered, with a smile so nobody could call it what it was. "And her shadow," she added, nodding in my direction. Vaguely. Like I was furniture in the room, like I was something the room contained rather than someone the room should look at. My face burned. I was standing there holding the pie I had baked, still smelling faintly of the onions I'd chopped in her kitchen 2 hours earlier. A few people chuckled. The polite, cowardly kind. Imogen's smile tightened at the edges like it was causing her physical pain. Vianne's eyes found me for 1/2 second, just long enough to confirm the comment had landed. Then she turned back to her audience. My hands trembled around the pie dish. I forced a small smile, because I would not give her tears at this table. But inside, something snapped cleanly. If she was going to call me a shadow, I was going to show everyone exactly what she'd been using me to hide. My name is Talia Wren. I've been dimming myself since I was old enough to understand that being useful was easier than being visible. In the bathroom, I gripped the sink, breathed through the sting behind my eyes, heard Vianne's voice carrying from the dining room, heard Imogen's quieter voice answering beneath it. I stared at my reflection and said the sentence to myself. "You're not a shadow." Said it like I was trying to convince someone who wasn't fully convinced yet. When I walked back out, Vianne patted my arm with the warm energy of someone bestowing something. "That's my helper girl," she said, loud enough for the people nearby to hear. Helper, not niece, not family, helper. Like I was staff who had been allowed to attend. The worst part was that I'd let it happen for years, had absorbed each version of it without naming it out loud, because naming it made it real, and making it real meant dealing with the consequences that always came when you challenged Vianne's version of things. But something was different now. I carried the pie to the kitchen, set it on the counter, stood alone for a moment, and understood that the path I'd been walking had just reached a point where it could no longer continue in the same direction. On the drive home, the memory came back clearly. The beginning of it. Vianne's event planning business had been struggling 3 years earlier. She'd called me on a Sunday afternoon and said she just needed a hand with some design work. I was good at it. She knew that. I'd been building skills quietly while she'd been building a reputation loudly. "Just a few things," she'd said. "It'll be good exposure." Exposure. The word creative people were given instead of payment when someone wanted their labor and didn't want to pay for it. The few things became regular things. The regular things became expected things. She'd text at midnight with a panicked request about a seating arrangement or a vendor timeline. I would fix it. Sometimes she forgot to pay me. I pretended it didn't matter. Imogen would thank me quietly afterward. With her eyes down, the specific gratitude of someone who was embarrassed by what they'd witnessed but didn't know how to stop it. Vianne would take credit loudly, radiantly. I sat in my car outside my apartment and understood something clearly. The Thanksgiving comment wasn't new. It wasn't a slip or a moment of poor judgment. It was just the first time she had said it in front of enough witnesses that I could no longer pretend it wasn't what it was. The text arrived the morning after Thanksgiving, before I'd made coffee. "Need you to redo the holiday flyer ASAP. The font is wrong and the color block is off. Don't be slow about it." No hello. No acknowledgement of the previous evening. No recognition that she had introduced me to a room full of family and guests as furniture. Just the demand, clean and immediate. I was supposed to start a new contract role the following week. My first real independent work. Something I'd earned through my own effort and connections rather than through proximity to someone else's business. Vianne had no awareness of it because I hadn't told her. I'd learned to protect forming things from her. I typed back, "I can't today," she replied within 30 seconds. Funny, shadows don't get busy. I sat with my phone in both hands. The specific cruelty of that sentence, said so casually. like it was a light joke between two people who both understood the terms of their arrangement. My hands were shaking slightly. I screenshot the message. Saved it to a folder I created right there, on the spot. Not because I had a plan yet, because I was done pretending I had imagined her cruelty. The folder existed now, and I was going to fill it. Imogen called me late that same night. Her voice was small, the voice she used when she'd been carrying something for too long and it had finally become too heavy. "I'm sorry," she said. She shouldn't have said that at dinner. I held the phone and didn't answer immediately. "Why didn't you say something?" I asked, gently, no accusation, just the real question. Imogen exhaled, a long, slow sound, like releasing pressure she'd been holding since before the dinner. "Because she punishes me," she said. The word punish. Said clearly, without softening. Imogen knew exactly what she was describing. "She says I make her look bad when I disagree publicly," Imogen continued, so I stopped. I nodded to myself. Imogen wasn't the golden child in the way I'd always understood golden children to work. She wasn't celebrated because Vianne genuinely loved her best. She was a trophy, displayed, managed. Trophies didn't talk back. Imogen added, voice dropping further, she told me, "You make her look bad because you're too quiet." "I'm quiet because I'm tired," I said. Silence on the line. Then, very softly, Imogen said, "Me too," and she started crying. We stayed on the phone for a long time after that, neither of us talking much. Just two people who had been circling the same thing from different sides, finally acknowledging they were looking at the same thing. I spent a Sunday going through my email, the whole previous year. Every message thread with Vianne, every request, every urgent text followed by a delivered flyer or timeline or vendor communication. By the time I finished, my stomach hurt. Dozens of requests, real work, measurable, professional deliverables. Not one invoice paid. Not once had she put me on payroll. Not once had she offered a rate or asked about compensation. The arrangement was always framed as help, as family, as the exposure she was generously providing by letting me be associated with her events. I opened a spreadsheet, started entering dates, tasks, event names, hours estimated, a basic hourly rate at the low end of industry standard. When the total appeared at the bottom of the column, I sat back. My friend Perrin came over that afternoon. Practical, direct. The kind of friend who told you what was true rather than what felt comfortable. I showed her the spreadsheet without saying anything. She looked at it for a while. "Talia," she said, "that's not help, that's exploitation." The word felt too large at first. Then I thought about the text message sitting in my folder. Shadows don't get busy. The word fit exactly right. And I kept adding dates to the spreadsheet. A recruiter emailed me on a Wednesday morning. The message was professional, careful, but its content made me sit up immediately. "We've received some concerns about potential reliability issues," the recruiter wrote, specifically around deadlines and professional consistency. My stomach dropped. I knew exactly who had said something. I knew because nobody else in my professional circle would have had any reason to raise concerns. Nobody else had a reason to want me dismissed before I even arrived. I called Vianne, kept my voice measured, asked her directly. She laughed, warm and patient. The laugh she used to make people feel like they were overreacting to something obvious. "I was just being honest with them, sweetie," she said. "You're emotional. It's not your fault." Emotional. Her favorite label for anyone she was currently hurting. "Do not contact my professional connections," I said. Calm. Clear. "Do not make calls or send messages about my work to anyone." Her tone sharpened. "You think you're too good for this family now?" I ended the call, then spent an hour sending the recruiter my portfolio. 3 years of clean, documented work. Professional references, timelines, and delivery records. The recruiter replied the next morning. "Thank you for clarifying. Everything looks excellent." It was a small thing, but it felt like sunlight coming through a window that had been painted over. 2 weeks after Thanksgiving, a message arrived in my professional inbox from someone I didn't recognize immediately. A client from one of Vianne's events. "Hi, I'm not sure if this is the right contact," they wrote, "but I think you might be the person who designed the invitations for the Hargrove anniversary event last spring. I've been looking everywhere. Those invitations were genuinely beautiful." I read the message twice, heart pounding. Then I wrote back, simply and honestly. "Yes, I designed those, the client replied within an hour. Vian said her team handled all the creative. I had no idea there was a specific designer. Can I get your contact information for a project we're working on? Team. She'd said her team. I was her team. A single person. Working late on seating arrangements and digital campaigns and invitation design. Credited to nobody. Absorbed into the plural of team as though I were a department rather than a person who had a name. I typed my professional email, sent it. My hands were shaking slightly. Not from fear or sadness, from understanding something clearly for the first time. This was how spotlights moved. Not all at once, not loudly, quietly. One honest conversation at a time. The light was already starting to shift. At a family brunch 3 weeks later, Vian introduced me to a friend she'd brought. She gestured in my direction with the vague energy she used for things that were present but unimportant. This is Talia, she said. She's always following Imogen around. Following. Like I was a lost dog. Like I didn't have a life I'd been quietly building while she was busy claiming credit for my work. I kept my tone even. Actually, I'm starting a contract role next week, I said. Design and operations, it's a good opportunity. Vian blinked. The specific blink of someone surprised by a prop asserting something about itself. Oh, she said. And then after a pause. That's cute. Cute, said the way she said everything designed to make something smaller than it was. Imogen was sitting across the table. I watched her look down at her plate. The shame in her face was familiar. She'd been feeling it for years on my behalf. The secondhand embarrassment of watching someone she cared about get minimized repeatedly by someone she couldn't challenge. I understood something clearly in that moment. Vian didn't just position me as a shadow. She used Imogen as the lamp. Imogen existed to produce the light. I existed to be visibly smaller than it. Both of us were objects in her arrangement. Neither of us had agreed to that. Perrin helped me build the paper trail properly. We spent 2 evenings at my kitchen table going through every file, every email thread, every deliverable. We pulled metadata from the design files, creation dates, last modified timestamps, my account name attached to every document, the vendor timelines, the seating charts, the digital campaign assets, all of it traceable back to my laptop and my hours. It wasn't just I helped with things. It was I created the work, specifically. Documentably. Meanwhile, Vian kept texting, "Need you tonight. Stop acting brand new. You owe me for everything I've given you. Oh." I added each text to my folder because that word, "oh," was the architecture of the whole arrangement. She had built her sense of my obligation carefully over years, the opportunities she'd provided, the exposure she'd granted, the family dinners I'd been allowed to attend as her helper girl. She had constructed a debt that had never been real. And now that I was no longer honoring a debt that didn't exist, she was showing me exactly who she'd always been underneath the warmth she performed for audiences. The folder was growing. The paper trail was solid. I was getting close to ready. Imogen arrived at my apartment on a Thursday evening without calling ahead. She sat on my couch and looked like someone who had finally run out of the energy it took to maintain a performance. She wants me to post about the business, Imogen said. She wrote the caption herself. She held out her phone. I read it. Proud of my mom's creativity and vision. Her work inspires me every day. My throat tightened. The last campaign was yours, Imogen said. Voice cracking. I know it was yours. She knows it was yours. She wants me to say it was hers in writing, where people can see it. I took Imogen's hands. You don't have to be her proof, I said. Imogen's tears came quickly. The way tears came from someone who had been holding them back since long before this specific moment. I don't know how to stop, she admitted. If I refuse, she calls me ungrateful. If I do it, I feel sick. There's no option that doesn't cost me something. I sat with her. I understood. I'd been living inside the same system from a different position. Imogen from the display case, me from the storage room. We were both stuck inside a cycle of control she'd been running for years. And I was beginning to understand that my exit had to become a door for both of us. Vian called me on a Monday afternoon with the warm energy of someone announcing something generous. I've landed a big one, she said. Holiday charity gala. Real donors, local press, the whole thing. Obviously you'll help. Obviously, I kept my voice neutral. What would the pay look like? Silence. A full beat of it. Then Vianne's laugh, sharp underneath the lightness. Pay? She said. Honey, you're lucky I include you in opportunities like this. Included, like attending my own labor as a guest was a privilege she was extending. No pay means I'm not available, I said. Her voice changed immediately. The warmth evaporated. Then you can stay a shadow forever, she said. Low and certain. The voice she used when she was done performing and was saying what she actually meant. My hands were shaking, but my voice stayed steady. Watch me leave the light, I said. And I hung up. I sat on my kitchen floor afterward for a while, feeling two things simultaneously, nauseous from the confrontation, from the specific physical response of standing up to someone your nervous system had been trained for years to accommodate, and proud, in a small, new, unmistakable way. I had said no, clearly, without apology. And the ceiling hadn't fallen. The relatives started calling within 48 hours. Vianne says you've abandoned the family project. She gave you your start, Talia. You should be grateful. This isn't how family works. Each call delivered the same message with different warmth levels. Some concerned, some firm, some quietly disappointed in the way relatives were when they decided you were the difficult one. I said the same thing to each of them. I'm not working without compensation anymore. The reactions told me everything. People acted as though I had said something morally questionable, something selfish, something that violated an unspoken agreement about what family required. That was the specific magic of what Vianne had built. She had taught everyone around her to treat my labor as love, so that the moment I put a number on it, it looked like I was putting a number on my affection. Imogen texted me after the second day of calls. She's furious. Be careful. Be careful. Because Vianne didn't lose control of things quietly. She punished loudly. I added each call to my notes, documented each framing, built the record of what was being said and by whom and when. The folder was very full now, and I was very ready. Perrin and I drafted a formal email together, professional language, clear, no emotional content anywhere in it. The email stated 3 things: that I retained full ownership of all creative work produced for Vianne's business events, that future use of those assets required written attribution and agreed compensation, that she no longer had my permission to present that work as produced by her team. I read it 4 times before sending. Then I sent it. Vianne's reply arrived within minutes. Who exactly do you think you are? I screenshot it, added it to the folder. Then her second message. Without me, you are nothing. You should remember that. I looked at that sentence for a long time. Without me, you are nothing. Said with the specific certainty of someone who had spent years constructing the conditions that would make that sentence feel true. The late-night requests, the unpaid labor, the public positioning as helper and shadow, the erosion of my professional identity so thoroughly into hers that the line between her work and mine had become deliberately invisible. I typed one reply. Please communicate through email only going forward. Then I closed the thread and felt the specific weight of armor I hadn't known I was allowed to put on. The client who'd reached out about the anniversary invitations came through. They'd referred me to an agency looking for a contract designer. I went to the interview on a Thursday morning, put on clothes I felt like a professional in rather than a helper. Brought my portfolio printed cleanly, organized, documented with dates and contexts. They asked about my process, about how I approached timelines, about how I communicated with clients when something wasn't working. I answered everything, clearly, without the reflexive shrinking I'd been practicing for 3 years in Vianne's orbit. For the first time in a professional setting, I felt like a person being evaluated on my actual work. Not an extension of someone else's brand, not a team, not a shadow with good design instincts. A professional with a specific portfolio of documented, attributable work. They offered me the contract at the end of the meeting. I cried in my car afterward, quietly, with my hands folded in my lap. Not because the contract was glamorous. It wasn't. It was steady, real, mine. That was the whole reason for the tears. Mine. My phone buzzed. Vianne calling. I watched the screen until it stopped. The silence felt like something I'd earned. Vianne posted to social media the following week, a long caption, soft and self-pitying, the specific tone she used when she wanted to be seen as someone bearing something gracefully, Some people will use everything you offer them and then decide they've outgrown you. That's the nature of giving without expectation. Comments flooded in praising her. People who knew her from the community events, people who knew the version she'd been carefully presenting for years. She tagged Imogen in a photo from a recent event. Imogen looked rigid in it. Then Vianne sent me a direct message. "You're embarrassing this family. Fix this publicly, or I will explain what kind of person you actually are." I sat with that for a while. The threat inside the message, the specific confidence of someone who believed they controlled the story. I replied once, "I'm not responsible for your reputation." Then I added her response to the folder, printed it, placed it behind the email thread documentation. Paper didn't argue. Paper didn't feel embarrassed or defensive. Paper just existed with its date and its content and its evidence of exactly what had been said and by whom. Let her talk. The gala was 3 weeks away, and I was almost completely ready. I was helping my grandmother sort through a pile of mail she'd let accumulate when I found it. A notice from the charity organization hosting the gala. Printed on official letterhead, vendor payments for prior engagements currently delayed pending account review. Pending account review. I read it twice. Vianne had been collecting deposits from clients, organizing events under the banner of family excellence and community investment, and she wasn't paying her vendors on time. My stomach turned. Not because I was surprised, because I understood what it meant. If vendors weren't being paid, the gala was running on borrowed credibility, on the image she'd built and the deposits she'd collected, and the assumption that the professional infrastructure behind the events was as solid as she presented. It wasn't. I showed Perrin the notice that evening. Perrin looked at it carefully. "She's digging her own hole," Perrin said. I nodded. I didn't want to destroy Vianne. That wasn't what this was. But I was done allowing myself to be connected to something that was starting to crack from the inside. I was done being the design and operational foundation of events she was presenting as entirely her own. When the structure fell, I was not going to be underneath it. Perrin and I built the portfolio deck over 2 evenings. Clean, professional, organized by event and date. Each section included the design files with creation timestamps, the email approvals from Vianne, where she'd signed off on my work, the vendor communications I'd managed, the operational documents I'd produced. For each event, the attribution was clear. Not Vianne's team, not the business, not a collective. Me, specifically. With documentation. We also prepared a single statement. Simple, professional. I am the creator of the design and operational assets for the listed events and am available independently for future work. No attacks, no insults, no emotion anywhere, just truth with timestamps. Imogen called me the night before I finished assembling the folder. Her voice was low. "She's planning to introduce me at the gala," Imogen said, "as proof of the family's success. She told me exactly where to stand and what expression to have." My chest tightened. Imogen paused. Then, "I don't want to go." "Then don't," I said. "She'll punish me," Imogen said. I sat with that for a moment. Then I said something I meant completely. "We're gonna make sure she can't." The sentence surprised both of us. But neither of us walked it back. Imogen met me at a quiet cafe the following morning. She wrapped both hands around her coffee cup like she needed something to hold. "I'm exhausted," she said. Not dramatically, just as a fact she was reporting. "I know," I said. "I'm tired of being her star," she said. "I'm tired of standing where she tells me to stand and smiling at the angle that photographs best and saying the things that make her look generous for having me." I looked at her. "And I'm tired of being her shadow," I said. We sat with that for a moment, the 2 positions she'd assigned us. One elevated, one diminished. Both controlled. Both serving the same central purpose of making Vianne look like the source of everything valuable around her. Imogen's eyes were wet. "If I speak up, the family will turn on me," she said. "They might," I said honestly. "Some of them." I reached across the table and put my hand over hers. "But they'll finally know what's actually real," I said. "That's different from what they know now." Imogen nodded, very slowly. "If it comes up at the gala," she said finally. "If there's a moment, I'll tell the truth." That promise was small, but it felt like a match being struck in a dark room. Everything that followed would require this moment as its foundation. The official gala invitation arrived on a Wednesday. Flummel. Printed on thick cardstock. Vianne's business name prominent at the top. She sent me a text the same afternoon. Be there. Don't make it weird. Don't make it weird. Meaning, come. Stand where I put you. Smile at the angle I've approved. Don't claim anything. Don't correct anything. Don't exist in a way that complicates my performance. Perrin asked if I was going. I thought about it honestly. Not going meant disappearing. Meant Vianne delivered her version of the story unchallenged to a room full of donors and press while vendors waited on payments and my work was displayed under her name. Going meant something different. Going meant showing up as myself. With documentation. I'm going, I said, but not as her shadow. I printed the portfolio deck, brought copies of the key email threads where she'd approved my work under her name and declined to pay me. Placed everything in a slim folder. My hands trembled slightly when I put the folder into my bag the evening before. Not from fear. From the specific feeling of someone who has prepared completely for something and is now simply waiting for the moment to arrive. The gala was tomorrow. I was ready. A family dinner 3 days before the gala. Vianne hosted it the way she hosted everything. Warmly. Centrally. She was setting the stage for the gala. Building the narrative around herself before the main event. Making sure everyone in the family arrived at the venue with the correct understanding of who was responsible for what. Midway through dinner, she laughed lightly and said, "Don't worry, everyone. Imogen is the star. Talia just helps behind the scenes." The room smiled. I held my fork. "Yes," I said. My voice completely easy. "I do help behind the scenes." Vianne smiled immediately. Relieved, she thought I was agreeing, thought I was settling back into the familiar shape she needed me in. Then I added gently, "I built the scenes." The table went quiet for one beat. One beat was enough. Vianne's smile tightened visibly. She changed the subject with the practiced speed of someone redirecting before anything had time to land, but I felt it. Under the table, Imogen pressed her foot lightly against mine. A small signal. "I heard you. I'm here. Keep going." Vianne was talking about something else now, performing normally. But underneath her performance, I could feel the specific energy of someone who had just registered a threat they didn't know how to categorize yet. Good. The gala was 3 days away. The venue was everything Vianne would have designed for herself. High ceilings, good lighting, the kind of space that made everyone inside it feel like they were attending something important. Donors in formal wear, a local news camera near the entrance. The coordinator Vianne had hired, moving efficiently through the room with a clipboard. Vianne glided in like she'd been made for this specific room. She greeted donors with the warmth of someone who genuinely loved people and happened to also need something from them. Imogen stood beside her, stiff in a way that looked like composure to everyone except me. I arrived with Perrin. Quietly. Without announcement. Vianne spotted me. For a fraction of a second, her expression flickered. She crossed the room toward me, smile back in place. "Don't you dare," she said. Very low, not for the room, just for me. I smiled pleasantly. "I'm here to support the charity," I said. Vianne studied my face, looking for what was underneath the pleasantness. Then the host tapped the microphone. "We'll begin the program in 5 minutes." Vianne turned toward the stage. I felt my pulse quicken in my chest. The folder was in my bag. The moment was coming. Everything I had prepared for weeks was about to become necessary. Vianne took the stage with the ease of someone in their natural habitat. She welcomed the donors, thanked the organizing committee, spoke about the charitable mission with the specific warmth that made people reach for their checkbooks. Then she gestured to where Imogen was standing. "And I want to acknowledge my niece," Vianne said. "Proof of what this family stands for. Excellence. Dedication. High standards. Applause." Imogen stood where she'd been placed, smiling the angle she'd been coached to smile. Vianne continued, voice building, the practiced rise of someone delivering a prepared conclusion. "Some people shine," she said, "and some are simply happy to exist in the background." Her eyes found me. The room chuckled softly. I raised my hand. Calm, polite. "Excuse me," I said. "May I clarify something about the creative work for tonight's event?" The host looked at me, at Vianne, at the donors whose attention had shifted. Vianne's face tightened. The host nodded. "Because donors were watching. and the room had gone completely quiet in the specific way that meant everyone was paying full attention. I stood, walked toward the side of the stage without rushing, without anger visible anywhere on my face, just a person walking toward something that needed to be said. I held up the folder. "My name is Talia Wren," I said. My voice was steady all the way through. I created the invitations, the program, the vendor coordination schedule, the seating arrangements, and the digital campaign for this evening's event. Murmurs moved through the room. Vianne laughed, sharp and quick. "She helped," she said into the microphone. "She assisted the team." I nodded gently. "Yes, here are the dated drafts and the email threads where each element was approved." I stepped toward the coordinator and handed over copies. I offered a second set to the donor standing nearest to me, who reached out his hand when he saw the documents. He opened the folder, looked through the first few pages. His eyebrows lifted. Imogen stepped forward. Her voice was shaking, but it was clear. "She's telling the truth," Imogen said. "Aunt Vianne did not design any of this." The room stilled. Vianne's face collapsed from the practiced warmth into something raw and furious. "You ungrateful," she started, then stopped, because the camera was nearby, because the donors were watching, because catching herself was the only move available. I kept my voice completely calm. "I'm not here to shame anyone," I said. "I'm here to correct attribution and protect my professional reputation." That sentence landed the way steel landed. Adult, clean, completely undeniable. Vianne couldn't call it drama without making herself look worse. I didn't stay for the aftermath. I said what I needed to say. I had done what I came to do. I handed my professional contact information to the coordinator and 2 donors who asked for it, answered their questions directly, confirmed I was available for independent work. Then, Imogen and I left together, both of us shaking slightly in the cool air outside. The specific shaking of people who had done something terrifying and necessary and were still processing. Which of those 2 feelings was larger? After the gala, the vendor payment questions surfaced. The coordinator quietly requested an invoice review. The documentation I had provided became part of a conversation that was no longer mine to manage. Vianne's carefully constructed image required maintenance she could no longer afford because too many people were now asking questions she couldn't answer cleanly. Within 6 weeks, I had signed my contract with the agency. My name on the work. My account. My professional identity separate and complete. The family split the way families split when truth arrived in a room that had been comfortable with a different story. Some defended Vianne, some apologized. Most went quiet. The following Thanksgiving, I didn't go to Vianne's house. I hosted dinner at my apartment. Perrin, Imogen, simple food, real conversation. A table where nobody's worth was ranked or performed. I looked around it and understood what I'd been missing. Not a bigger spotlight, my own light. And once you stepped into it, the shadow was impossible to go back to.